Daniel, welcome to 3A Conversations. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're giving us 3 fascinating nighttime conversations to discuss. Really intriguing. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about you and your career. And your professional career on your own starts about 2001 when you set up your own business. But tell us a little about the journey to that, because you're born in Manchester?
No, born in Sheffield on a Wednesday.
On a Wednesday. Right,
yeah,
go on then.
Born in Sheffield on a Wednesday. Grew up in sort of South Manchester between Stockport and Winslow, a place called Hanforth. Dad's a psychiatrist. My mum's a teacher, but was at the time teaching English as a foreign language when I was growing up. Grew up as a Chef Wednesday fan. You don't choose your religion; you get given it.
You joined Sky Sports in 1996. What drove you into the media and obviously sports, because you obviously loved it, but how did that come about?
I read history and politics at Sheffield University and enjoyed the social side of the university. And then when I left my sort of former life, I was really I love football coaching, and I thought that was my path, was to go down sort of youth development in football coaching. And I ended up, I got ill, I had asthma, and I had a couple of asthma attacks, sort of one after the other, not long after leaving university. And while recovering, I just started writing. I've been helping Simon Inglis write his 3rd edition. I'd been researching for him, his 3rd edition of this like seminal book called The Football Grounds of Great Britain. And it was just before the Euro 96. And from there, I got the idea that I'd write a history of Chef Wednesday, just while I was ill and I was sort of convalescing. And I started to sort of make some notes, and then I started doing interviews, and I'd speak to players and managers and chairmen and fans. And I got it all together, and it was published in 95, sort of just before my 23rd birthday. And when I finished writing the book, I was like, I want to do this, but on a screen. I want to make documentaries. That's what I'd really wanted to do. And from there, I got a job at Sky Sports on the then Soccer AM and Soccer Extra, pre-Tim Lovejoy, Soccer AM. And then Tim joined in that summer of 96. So I did a couple of years there and wrote another book. How can you write 2 books on Chef Wednesday? But I did. And then from there, I left Sky and I got a job at what was then Chrysalis Television, who used to do the Italian football. That was what then and the Formula One. That's what they were famous for. And they did The Impossible Job, the famous England documentary on Graham Taylor. And I worked in their Sheffield office. That was my sort of way of leaving London and coming back north. And then I had this idea to make a film about the North Korean football team. I'd done a 15-part series, 15-part documentary series for Sky Sports called Tales from the Premiership, which was about the then 30 teams that had played in the Premier League from 92 to 98. And I knew I wanted to make documentaries, and I knew I wanted to sort of stay in sort of TV and film. And I had this idea to make this North Korean documentary. I'd started trying to get the access to North Korea.
What was the catalyst for that?
I'd always wanted to find Pak De-Wijk, who scored the winning goal in 1966 against Italy. And going back to Simon Inglis, the author, he tried to get into North Korea and failed. And I was just discussing things with him. And he said, if you want to get into North Korea, this is the guy you need to meet, a guy called Nick Bonner. I got in touch with him. It turned out we'd been to the same school, although we're like 13 years apart. And I got access into North Korea. It took us 4 years to get that permission, by which time I was at Chrysalis. They didn't want to make the film about the North Koreans. So I left them for my own company, Very Much So Productions were called. And the reason for that was whenever I'd be out interviewing for Sky Sports, you'd ask any footballer a question, and the first word they'd say was, very much so. And then they'd give you the answer. And I said, if I ever have a production company, we're going to call it Very Much So Productions.
Going to talk about career in a minute. But just generally, Jonathan was intrigued about why you picked up the North Korean one. I'm intrigued about pretty much all of yours, bar 2. Hillsborough, I do get, we'll talk about that. But in general terms, what gives you the concept, the sort of start of an idea? Because there's some diverse stuff in there, isn't there?
And everyone's different.
Yeah.
Every single film's been different. Some of them have been, certainly the early work. The early work was predominantly my idea, and then I'd go and try and find the finance or the commissioner to get that going. At a point in time, about 10 or so years ago, people were coming to me with their idea. Would I direct it? George Best is one of those. The Fall, the Mary Decker-Zola Budd film was I was a director for hire. But to be honest, even if someone comes to you with their project, you sort of take ownership as your own, because you have to have that passion, because at some point in the project it will just all seem impossible, and you will have that 3 a.m. conversation with yourself. And it's really important to care wildly about your film above all else at that moment, to get you through that time.
Fascinating. Well, let's move on to the first one then, the first 3 a.m. conversation. And we've touched on the subject earlier, the North Korean team, 1966 World Cup. But really, the conversation's not about that. It's about, if I can sort of paraphrase how you put it to us, it's about getting to the end of a project that you've worked really, really hard on, and you've clearly planned and paid for and led, in your case, and you realise it just isn't what you want. And you had that, didn't you, with this particular film? So,
to get to North Korea, we'd had to go through so many people saying no, so many people saying it's not possible to get to North Korea. We don't even understand the concept of your film. And I was like, we're in 2001, South Korea are hosting the World Cup with Japan next year. This is North Korea. This is the greatest shocking World Cup history. They beat Italy. North Korea were 1,000 to 1 outsiders before the 1966 World Cup. Italy were the favourites. North Korea won 1-0. Italy went home. Italy's fans pelted their own players with rotten tomatoes at the airport. North Korea did this heroic game at Goodison Park against Portugal. They were 3-0 up after 23 minutes. They lost 5-3. Eusebio scored 4. It's amazing. They went home and were never heard of again. So to go and find them, I could see how that would make a great film, and a lot of people couldn't. Having got the finance together, and that meant effectively selling and getting private people to invest about £90,000 to be able to get out to North Korea and get through all that process. Convince the North Koreans that I was a genuine football fan. I wasn't going in for any political purpose, or that I was going to throw them under the bus. Then we come back, really lucky. We got an Oscar-winning editor on board, a woman called Justine Wright, who just won for One Day in September, the Munich Olympic Massacre film. So she edited, and every time we made a cut, it was brilliant, and it was just getting better and better every single time, and I was really on a high. And then we'd used, and I really hate saying or naming, but we used Charles Dance as our narrator, and I remember going in. I directed him for his narration, and he sounded amazing. It was so good, and I was so happy. Went back with the recording, and then we put the music, the composed music in, and we put his voiceover in, and then we just hit the play button and sat back and watched 80 minutes, and I could not have been more deflated having watched it. It just didn't work. And I couldn't really, there were 3 pieces of music that didn't work. The rest of it was absolutely fine. And then Charles Dance's narration just didn't work. It was it was amazing, but it felt quite detached. And I'd been the guide narrator before, and I obviously speaking pretty similar to this, although my tone was slightly higher 25 years ago. And I was persuaded, I didn't want to do it, but I was persuaded that I should go back and re-record the narration, and actually we should pay to have the guide music, the commercial music in. And we had it was something like £6,036 left in the budget, and the clearance cost was £6,018. I still hadn't been paid after 2 years. So it was literally, that's it. You will not be paid to make this film whatsoever, but it will be the film that you want and the film that will work. But I remember thinking, like, I've gone through all this sacrifice and it's just not working. And then you think, and it'll never work, because how are we going to change it? And I've since found out that's actually part of the filmmaking process. There'll always be a point where you're like, this isn't working anymore. And it's actually how you fix it.
Quite brave to take out one of the the main components and the one with the big name.
Yeah, because the considered opinion at the time was you need a named narrator in order to make this work, make it accessible, make it worthy of the BBC, make it more internationally appealing. And he was a huge actor. He still is.
Did you get pushback from the BBC or whomever, because presumably they wanted to have the name as much as the documentary?
Yeah, they also wanted something that worked. It ended up being about persuading me that this was the right choice to have me on it. I like talking. I don't like the sound of my own voice. And then to hear it back. And I do remember going into and I used to do, when I was at Soccer AM, I used to do a lot of narration and voiceover and do that silly accents and stuff. So I wasn't unused to doing it. And it was my script as well. So I'd written everything. So I knew it inside out. But there was something almost like counter ego about it. I just didn't want my voice on it. But it ended up being the right decision, but it took a lot of persuading. I think I instinctively knew that was the right decision. It was almost admitting it to myself.
Yeah.
That I'd made the wrong decision on something that had gone so right for so long.
Yeah.
I don't know if I took others' opinions into consideration at the time, because it really felt about my almost failure. That it was all on me, success has many fathers, and, I just was, because I'd sort of, I was the one that led it from day one, from conception through to the fundraising, through to getting to North Korea, getting back out, bringing all this, all this amazing, we got 13 reels of original 35mm film out of North Korea. We exported it, and we had all the certificate of national treasure status that we could take it into China to get it transferred, to ship back. All these things had happened. It'd been an amazing experience. And so I was thinking about it really as like I'd done the failing, not that these days I'd react very differently. It was an experiment. You were allowed to make mistakes along that journey. This wasn't the finished film. And the one, I think, when we will talk about this, I'm sure, but the one I did have a feeling about this was Hillsborough, where I felt an enormous personal pressure to deliver on, and again, justice is used for Hillsborough, but to give the story justice. And at one point it wasn't working, and I was like, I know it will. I've got enough behind me. But I've had it with every film. I made a film about the miners' strike that was it's on Netflix at the moment, and I had the same feeling. At some point, you will get that feeling, and the longer I've done it, the more I understand we will get that feeling at some point. And it's going to be deeply unpleasant, but I know I can deal with it.
Let's move on to the second conversation, which is deeply personal, and thank you so much for agreeing to share it. And it's about a topic that a number of us have had experience of ourselves. But talk us through it, what the issue was.
Yeah, difficult one. So had our first child, a girl, in 2007. Miscarriage in 2008, and then pregnant very soon afterwards. And we didn't do IVF, but there was a lot of complications about getting pregnant. My wife got pregnant with a baby. Didn't know. We never knew with any of our kids whether it was going to be a boy or a girl until they popped out. We decided that was us. And she was pregnant with, what was going to be our second child. And then out of the blue, about 18 weeks, started bleeding. And was bleeding for 3 weeks, pretty much daily. And then finally they admitted her to hospital. This is in Sheffield at Jessop's. And she was then in there for 5.5 weeks, bleeding every day. I had a 2-year-old child. We just... the sort of weekend that she was in hospital, we were starting a house, an extension build. So had all that going on. She was bleeding. Then her waters broke at 22 weeks. And then we're dealing with all sorts of problems. It was a really complicated and horrific pregnancy. And the doctors had always said, just try to get, obviously you've got to get beyond 24 weeks for the baby to be viable. get as close as you can, ideally 32, but really 28. Any emergency cesarean now means you can't have another baby. Just the way that they do the incision. And I was going back and forth to the hospital and to nursery and to in-laws, and my parents were coming in. Everyone was sort of like trying to sort of do their best to support me. And at one point I do remember just having this sort of conversation. It was the only time I allowed myself to have the conversation, because I always thought it would turn out fine. I just assumed it would not turn out any other way. And I remember thinking this would be like an amazing film script, what we're going through. And at one point I did have one of those sort of weird disassociation moments, the first hemorrhage, where we were being told that Louise, my wife, was going to be taken to theatre because they had to decide who to save. And I sort of had transported myself above. I wasn't actually in there. I was sort of like, there was a film crew behind and they were sort of filming it as we were talking, and I wasn't really understanding what was happening. And I knew that we would have our baby and it would be fine. And I imagined that in the script, well, the baby would have to die because that's more of a film script. And I remember thinking this one night of like, for all the things that I know I'm doing, and that, what if it's all for nothing? Well, what if the baby doesn't survive? And very, very quickly sort of snapped out of it, and I just sort of remained on the positive and trying to get like Louise through all of that, because she was living it every day. I mean, she went in at 21 weeks and stayed in the same room for the next sort of 5.5 weeks. And I was going back and forth, and I just remember spending all the cash at the time, putting all those coins into parking meters at the hospital, if I could get a parking space there. Having to, if I was on the street, having to sort of go every 2 hours, 4 hours, depending what the maximum was, never knowing when the emergency would actually come, when I'd be wrong. Neighbours were brilliant. I remember dropping my girl, who was 2.25 at the time, 2, 3 in the morning, just dropping her off at the next door neighbours, having to then drive into Sheffield Centre to go for another emergency. And then our baby was born at 26 weeks and 4 days, and just survived 12 hours, and sadly passed away. And it was a roller coaster. It was a sort of a miniature version of the previous 5.5 weeks. Those 12 hours were like the joy of birth, then a struggle. And I remember going in and seeing him for the first time, and sort of thinking it, and I voiced it would be okay. And the midwife said, no, he's a very poorly boy. And then he's like, oh, fuck, excuse my language. That's the end, and also speaking to the consultant, who's an amazing consultant, who stayed on. His shift ended and he carried on with us for the whole time. He said it's 20/80, your chances of survival. And then it just really hit me. And I know she said, like, I just collapsed and just was, screaming. And and that, but then he recovered, and then they came in and said, I was really struggling. The beeps are going off again. And so they took us to a room to prepare to have him for his last moments. And the door opened, consultant's there, no baby. And he said, he's made an amazing recovery, and for now he's fine. And this is all happening. And then Louise was wheeled back up to the ward, She was up and down. I stayed in the intensive care unit. And and then they finally came back in and said, no, it's going downhill. What do you want to do? And we decided, we just wanted to hold him. So on the 30th of June. And it's weird how when you look back, it's nice that we have a birthday to celebrate, and a passing day. But he passed on a day later, but in our arms, which was the most important thing. And there's not a happy ending to that, but a year later, 30 months after we buried George, our second girl was born. And I still refer, we've had 3 children, never forget. But it's now 17 years, and I don't have a problem talking about it, but it still brings the same emotions back up. Yeah, you can tell. Less intense, but still there. But it's sort of important honour him and people who have been through this, whether that's a stillbirth or a live birth death. There are an incredible number. I think the year 2009, because I did end up writing a script about it that stayed in my drawer. But it's something like 7,000 neonatal deaths that year. It's an incredible number.
A lot of people. As you were telling that story, and thank you so much for sharing, I was thinking back to previous guests, and with one exception, Andy Grant, the para who was blown up in Afghanistan, each of the 3 a.m. conversations has been about one specific issue, a business issue or a personal issue, but it's very clear what the issue is, how they dealt with it. Yours was an absolute concertina of issues, wasn't it? How did you keep yourself sane in that situation?
I think I kept myself busy with everything that needed to be done at the time.
Right.
And I didn't, I'm not going to say I didn't accept help, because people offered and they gave us help, but I almost wanted to do it myself. So my child was 2. I was getting help, and I would have to arrange, if anything happened tonight, where's she going to go? And we're arranging all the dietary stuff with my wife, and it was all about trying to keep myself busy. The house build, keeping on top of that. And then, having asked myself that conversation of what if it's all for nothing, then coming back without a baby, and then it was all effectively for nothing. But it was one of the, I guess I couldn't look back and think I'd not done everything I possibly could to support my wife, to help my child, to be there, to support other people, as it turned out, that also required help, seeing me like tortured through that time.
What's also interesting is that these conversations that people have is they deal with an issue and move on. But here, this is an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
And how do you feel that's affected you and the family?
I know that myself and my wife reacted very differently. And I remember at the time being told that people in grief, it's like a tsunami that hits you from behind with no warning whatsoever at some point. And having 2 people going through that together in a marriage, and there's plenty of examples, obviously, from Hillsborough families, you're expected to look after each other. And it's like 2 people with really severe flu being told you've got to nurse each other back to health. And neither of you are capable of nursing yourself at the time. So there's an awful lot of strain on both. And I thought, if you'd have told me 10 years earlier, you're both going to go through this, this is how you'll react, I thought I'd be a bit more stoic and sort of get on with it. And actually I was an emotional wreck for an awful long time. And certain songs that still send me over the edge now. And that just I associate with either the time or the experience. And there's parallels, with the Hillsborough families, that I know that there were children that were born after the event who have grown up with a loss, very public loss. I've always thought it was important to talk to them about it. It's part of our family history.
But then you said earlier, ultimately it was all for nothing, what you'd gone through. But it clearly wasn't.
No, absolutely.
It clearly wasn't, because of how you react now.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's almost like I know a part of me died that day. But it's like, just sort of feels like I was in that. It's a really similar sort of family story to me.
Yeah. Let's move on to conversation number 3. and it is Hillsborough. And it is, as I said in the introduction, the seminal documentary, I think, on the tragedy and what followed. Born in Sheffield on a Wednesday, university in Manchester, and moved to South Manchester, and you weren't at the game.
No.
So what was the catalyst for making this one? So
University of Sheffield. I was in.
I apologise.
No. But it's I I think relevant because I was meant to be at the game.
Right.
And for people that don't realise or don't remember, FA Cup semi-final, always on a neutral ground.
Yep.
But the tickets never went to the neutral ground, the neutral club, which that day was Sheffield Wednesday. So they never went to that. And my friend was the chairman and his wife was the secretary of the Wednesday Supporters Club. They sold programmes and did stewarding on the day. So if I could get across to Sheffield for then, I could somehow get in. And my mum barred me from doing it the night before the semi-final because I was doing GCSEs and I needed to focus, apparently, which was not, for me, not the case. So, and the really, I remember it distinctly, I was delivering leaflets as a sort of, for 10 quid for friend's company on an estate. And I saw through someone's front window a Norwich player walking off a pitch in tears. They just played Everton. They'd lost the semi-final to Everton.
Right. Yep.
I then it was too far to walk home, got to phone box, 10p, phoned my dad, can I have a lift? And he said, oh, there's some bad news. And my reaction was, oh, another Liverpool semi-final, an all Scouse final. That was the only bad news I could see was that Liverpool had won. I knew Everton had won. And we're going to be lumbered with this Scouse final in 1989. And he's like, no, there's been a problem at Hillsborough. There have been some deaths. And I think it was 5 at the time. And then by the time we got home, we saw the unravelling of everything. And much later, I found out the people that I would have been selling programmes outside the ground, and we were counting that we would have been, because they were counting the money in the gymnasium when they brought all the bodies in. And I now look back as a 16-year-old and a number of young lads that died with that age.
Yep.
I'm not sure how I could have handled that or recovered from that, of just the most horrific experience. So I'm quite pleased that I didn't go. But I remember not being able to comprehend that there could be any worse news than Liverpool had won a game.
And it was a place you knew.
Yeah, and I mean, at Hillsborough, I've been a season ticket holder. I've been going regularly since end of 78, 79, season ticket holder from 80, 81. Same seat, South Stand, which is underneath where the gantry was in the old South Stand. So again, it was very much like I'd witnessed it, because the view
the view,
yeah. So the camera angle that you get, that was my view. And I was really badly affected because I was a football fan and I'd been in a lot of near misses myself. And I remember we went to Anfield. I took a scarf and a shirt on the Thursday after, when all the ground was starting to fill up with flowers. Yeah. And I was on the Kop, and John Aldridge was standing next to me in absolute tears, just wanting a moment to himself. And I laid my shirt down, and the weirdest thing, about 2 years later, I was at it's like a trade union exhibition in Manchester, and they had a little thing on about Hillsborough. And I looked down and my shirt was there. And it turned out that an FSA member, Sheila, had seen my shirts, known it was mine, and thought, we'll put that in the to keep pile. Because there was a load of, shirts and stuff that were whatever, they were going to Africa or wherever they were going, but some were going to be kept, and mine was kept. And it was the weirdest thing. But sort of knowing the types of people that had died, the ages that they were, and instinctively being a football fan and being a member of the FSA, the Football Supporters Association at the time, you knew what had happened, and you knew that what was being said hadn't happened. And I'd always felt I wanted to tell a story about this at some point. It definitely in the back of my mind. I remember a policewoman, when I was trying to access the police archive, a policewoman saying to me, just be careful because Hillsborough will get you. And I was like, I've just got to get it right. I've got to get it right. And there were countless conversations of, am I getting it right? Are we doing what we need to do? And before, we'd done a very loose assembly of the edit, but I knew we didn't have the people yet that were going to be the spine of the film. And I was not that far from where we are right now. And we did a day of interviews. It was 13 hours interviewing 6 people. And it's by far the most intense day of filming I've ever had. By far. And you can hear there's just me, sound man and cameraman in the room, and we're just sniffing all the way through with what we're being told.
Yeah.
And I just needed to. I always told all of our interviews, especially families and survivors, you know, there's two things. I've been through child loss myself in very different circumstances to you, but and I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan, and you do have to know that as well. And I still go and watch my team play at that stadium, and I still think about what happened there every time I go. It doesn't really leave you, and it's been more intense since making Hillsborough. But yeah, I just needed to make sure we got it right. And that day specifically, when we did those interviews, I was like, there was just this little shifting in my 3 a.m. conversation. I was a little bit happy that I knew we had the spine of the film. It was going to be really intense to make it, and we were going to go through the usual roller coaster. There would be a day when I thought, this isn't going to work, but we will get there. I know we have the content. And the editor, Andy Warboys, brilliant editor. And I remember we did a screening with the families in 2014, actually, of the first version of the film. And he said to me then, do you know, I've spent every day of the past 4 months crying. And that was when, you know, it does get to you. And seeing that vicarious trauma, it's nothing compared to what the families have gone through and the survivors, but it does get to you. And I know that those conversations for me would just get it right, make sure we get it right.
So it was a constant pressure more than
Yeah.
one particular moment.
Yeah, but there was one moment where that pressure just relieved itself a little bit, because I knew we had the content. I knew there was going to be a lot of pressure, but at least now I know we have the spine. It's called the spine of the film, and I know we've got that. But yeah, it was just, you know, I've had a lot of letters from the families since on various occasions, and I keep in touch with many of them. Just thank you notes for what you've done. And even the last anniversary a year ago, I came over, and not many people in the cot, but, you know, went to the pub, and there was that people know the film and they know what we've done. And, you know, I remember going to the BAFTAs, and when it was announced, the ego side of me was like, surely it can't be any other except for us. And obviously there could be another choice, but they said Hillsborough went down to the front, and there was two things I was thinking, and one was like, this is for the families. This is absolutely for the families and the survivors, and that's what I attributed to in the speech. But also it was for 20 years of work. You know, my sort of 20 years of sort of all the work that I did, all the films that I made, it was all climaxing then. It was a BAFTA for a lot of people's hard work in all the films, and getting that experience together and to craft that film. I couldn't have done that. When I made The Game of Their Lives, I couldn't have made Hillsborough.
No.
Yeah, everything led up to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an amazing. I mean, it's like 9 years ago now, but I kind of remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I did the public inquiry for the FSA, and I mean, I said earlier, we deal with the cards you've got. We didn't have many cards, but and we got very little cooperation as well. In fairness, from any of the potential defendants in subsequent litigation, and I thought I was a student of Hillsborough, but watching the video again. Before today, there's so much that you got that I never saw, and the public definitely never saw in all of the broadcasting that was done. Did you get that level of cooperation by the end from the authorities, if I can put them in that category?
I mean, there was a couple of things. The biggest sort of cooperation really was from the BBC, who just like, let me have the archive and trusted me. It would be different today with cell phones and people uploading everything, but I sort of, there was a lot of stuff we hadn't seen. Comment, you know, those Liverpool fans late again. That comment, I thought that was I didn't think it was a myth, but I did wonder whether it was a bit of an urban myth. I'd heard so many stories about it, and I'm like, did a did he really say that? And then we found it in the archive. And then the whole manufacturing the story about everyone drinking in various pubs. I'd seen through the Hillsborough Independent panel put everything up online. So I'd seen a lot of these papers that showed the police going round and asking every single pub in the Sheffield area, how many fans were in? Was it Forest? Was it Liverpool? What time did the last person leave? As if that's got anything to do with anything. Were they, how many drinks had been bought that day in your pub? But then to see it on Pebble Mill and them actually plotting a chart around the city of Sheffield, that this is where all the drinking took place. And then you're like, oh my God, this is, it's there in plain sight. The big achievement, I think, of the film, twofold. One was to get 4 police officers to talk, which had never been done before, and seeing a little bit of the humanity of a police constable who's in the worst position, and a special constable in one case, the worst possible position that you can imagine. The special constable had become a special constable because he was a Sheffield United fan and wanted to get to Bramall Lane on Saturdays and get it free. That was his initial reason for being. And I think the other was, it's not that there wasn't anything new in that film, but it's the first time that everything was put together.
Right. What was the one thing that really, really horrified you that you uncovered? What was the sort of,
the one that immediately springs to mind, and there may be others, but the one that immediately springs to mind is Doreen, when she talks about not being able to kiss her baby goodbye. And that gets me every time I watch it. With mine especially, it makes me, I mean, I'm going now, but it makes me angry, really angry, and incredibly emotional thinking about, because she goes down to kiss her boy who's died the most awful death, and someone pulls her back and says, he's the property of the coroner. And, words just fail me. Again, just dignity. And knowing also how other people, that not necessarily in the film, but other people's experiences of that whole identification process. And then the support, and obviously they were almost the enemy, these people, how they were treated. And they deserved it. And that's, I find it really, there are 6 moments in Hillsborough that made me cry. Even now, I will sit and watch it with you and I'll cry in the exact same ones. But that moment especially is the one that just sends me off. It's the emotional cost, I think, that resonates with me.
It's the same with me, because obviously we weren't able to uncover what had happened. But there's 2 things.
But one you knew. That's the thing.
Well, we knew from by 5 o'clock on the day, because I was with Rogan at the match, and God, it's going to get me now. We were in the North Stand. Well, actually, no, he was in the South Stand with John Williams, another of our mates from Leicester University. And Rogan came home and said, we can't leave this. We've got a duty to find out what happened. And we went onto the pitch. How was this ever allowed to happen? But we went onto the pitch, into Leppings Lane, up the tunnel. And as soon as we got outside, we were inundated with Liverpool fans. They're saying that we kicked the gates down, and we didn't. And it had gone round the world by 5 o'clock. And we knew then, this is it. And we were able to get onto the media and what have you. But the 2 things that get me still to this day, one's real, and one I don't know if it's real to this day, was the well at the bottom of a terrace. Now, we've all stood on terraces, and we know the bottom step is deeper, and it was full of belongings, spectacles, papers, clothes. And that visually to this day gets me. But what I don't know is true, or whether I've had a nightmare and it's lodged in my memory bit, is we were walking up Leppings Lane to get into the press conference, and we did. I mean, it would never, ever happen these days, but we did. And a green van, in my mind, stops in front of us, and the back door pushes open, there's dead bodies inside, naked dead bodies. And Bobby comes out, shuts the door, drives off. To this day, I don't know if that happened now. I think it did. It's in the memory bank. But it's not in my statements that I gave to the inquiry. So did it happen? But again, it's your point. It was the emotional stuff, the personal stuff, not the pragmatic, after the event, public inquiry, burden of proof, evidence, interviewing witnesses, all of that sort of stuff that lingers. And it's never going to go. Never going to go.
No.
To some degree, that's the difference between the two. You were the lawyer looking for the facts.
Possibly.
You were the documentary maker looking for the emotion as well.
It gets me to this day, and I'm not a Liverpool fan, and I wasn't there on the day. But, it's, what is it now? Nearly 40 years.
Nearly 40 years.
Nearly 40 years.
Yeah, 37 years.
Yeah, 37.
Yeah, next April. We could go on all day, but we mustn't.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank
One
you.
last question. The last one you did was Orgreave, the strike.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
So what's next?
So in terms of challenges, this is the most challenging time in the industry. So in terms of trying to get anything off the ground, it's really difficult. So I'm working across 5 or 6 different projects. They're all at various levels of can we get them across the line. There is a film I've been working with an A-list football player who has to remain nameless, been filming with him for 3 years, which would be absolutely brilliant when it does come out, because it's not a football film. And there's just plenty of others that are just who's going to go first. But it's a really, really challenging time for the industry. I will be having 3 a.m. conversation myself.
Right. Well,
for sure.
I'm getting you back to talk about
Part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Dan, thank you so much for today. It's been great. And thank you for your honesty, your openness, and for speaking so about personal stuff.
And thanks for having me. And it's felt a very safe space. So thank you.